Ethiopia, one of the biggest and most populous African countries. I'm in Addis Ababa. It's the capital city of 4 million people, and by many considered the capital of African continent. Ethiopia is home to the oldest hominid. It's a home to the oldest Homo sapiens. It's a home to the largest and biggest megaliths. It's a home to one of the most powerful kingdoms that ruled the world a couple of thousand years back. But for many people, Ethiopia is the place where Lucy was discovered. In 1974, a team in Ethiopia discovered several hundred bones, and later on it was realized that that was a species, Australopithecus, which was between the gorillas and later Homo sapiens. It was a huge discovery. Why she was named Lucy? Well, 1974, in the research camp, every day the song Lucy in the Sky of Diamonds by Beatles was played. The most popular song, the most popular band ever, and now the oldest hominid. Using argon method of the volcanic ash that was discovered below Lucy on 2 layers, it was figured out that the age of the second layer was about 2.2 million years. The major feature of Lucy, behind the skull, which was rather small, reminding us of chimpanzee, was its bipedal feature. So, this was the first monkey that started walking on the ground. Later on, for example, in August of 2019, even older hominid was discovered, almost 3 million years. But Lucy has become almost a household item. Ethiopia, extremely important country for the whole planet.
Music is really annoying. If this is the entire movie, I'm gonna have to friggin' stop it.
A town named Aksum in northern Ethiopia. Hi, this is Dr. Sam Osmanagic, megalithic and pyramid sites researcher. Why is this place so important for the planet? First of all, Ethiopia is the place where the famous Lucy was discovered back in 1974. That was the first specimen of hominid So these were the species between the gorillas and chimpanzees and Neanderthals. The age 2.2 million years. And even though much older bipedals were discovered, for example in August of 2019, also in Ethiopia, Lucy became like an household item. And then 200,000 years old remnants of Homo sapiens. Most probably we, Cro-Magnons, Homo sapiens, are about 400,000 years old and the result of the genetic engineering. But the oldest specimen still discovered here in Ethiopia. And when we come to much more recent times, all three major monotheistic religions have a significant influence from this town of Aksum. The first one, Hebrew. It is said that the Ark of Covenant, the box, may be wooden, maybe metal, maybe golden, with 2 plates and 10 written commandments, are still held here, just a few hundred meters from where I'm standing right now, in the Holy Church, St. Mary's Church of Zion. As far as the Islamic tradition, it is said that the first group of followers, 12 men and 4 women, among them daughter of the Prophet Muhammad and the son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, found their refuge here in Ethiopia, in Aksum. At that time, Quraysh family who were ruling Mecca tried to get them back and judge them, but the king of Aksum did not allow that. And finally, Christianity. It seems that one of the 3 wise men, or 3 kings, who were present when the Jesus Christ was born, was coming from Ethiopia, according to the Ethiopian tradition. And then the first country who had cross on its national flag
That bird is really
was
freaking
this
annoying.
country right here. In the 4th century, when Eastern Roman Empire adopted Christianity as the official religion, Ethiopians were the first one to follow that rule, and Christianity became the ruling religion here. Now, what Smithsonian, Encyclopedia Britannica, Wikipedia, BBC, CNN, the major archaeological, scientific and educational institutions have in common when it comes to Aksum? They all claim that the biggest obelisks on the planet, behind me, date from the 4th century AD. And they are all wrong. They claim actually that the last ruler of the pagan empire here, just before they turned to Christianity, King Ezana, actually was the one who erected the biggest stela on the planet. This one right here. It is called the Grand Stela. And before him, he claimed a couple more stelas. Obelisk of Aksum, King Ezana stela of Aksum, were also erected by the people about 1700 years back. In this park, we actually have 3 types of these megalithic stones. Some of them, indeed, we can call stela, those with carvings. Some of them have flat 4 sides, nicely dressed. And some of them are just rough megalithic blocks. And they are all erected standing upright. The biggest one behind me, originally 33 to 34 meters long, has a mass of 520 tons. At the time when it was standing here, that was the largest, the most massive megalithic block erected on the planet. The biggest obelisk in Luxor, in Karnak, in Egypt, is 375 tons. However, there are blocks that are much bigger than this one here. For example, in eastern Lebanon, Baalbek. Until 3 years back, the biggest one was 1,250 tons. However, the Germans discovered below that one a couple of more blocks, even bigger, 1,600 tons. In Aswan, unfinished obelisk, which according to Wikipedia and other non-scientific sites is 1,250 tons, but according to my measurements, it is 1,450 tons, is also bigger than this one. The biggest block, made from granite, in the second largest pyramid at the Giza Plateau, Khafre Pyramid, is 220 tons. There are some megaliths in Russia reaching several thousands of tons. So it seems that thousands of years back, we did have megalithic culture capable of designing, shaping, transporting, and erecting these massive blocks. Besides 520 tons, we have 2 more. They are reaching 21 to 24 meters in height, 150 to 300 tons, and then several more. Those, they don't have any carvings, and their mass is in tens of tons. I counted 21 megalithic blocks. What I can see is that most of them who are missing now, laying broken in pieces in the land, have been violently broken. There has to be a big reason for that. So, let's go back to the times when this area was first inhabited in most recent time. It is about 950 years BC, when the first stone buildings were discovered, made from dry stone, not even from the bricks. And for hundreds of years, people were farming the land around. They lived around here. Now, I did mention the Ark of Covenant. As we know, the greatest Jewish kings, King David and King Solomon, established a state 3,000 years back, roughly 1000 BC. And the legend says that when King Solomon wanted to build his temple, known as the first temple, the most magnificent building of its time, he called merchants from all over the known world, wanted to pick up the material. And he heard about the Queen of Sheba, or Queen of Saba. So he invited her too. Well, in the Hebrew Bible, the Book of Kings, indeed, the Queen of Sheba or Queen of Saba was mentioned as the royalty who brought on camels unseen quantities of gold, precious stones, and incense. It is said that never before and never after such a huge quantity of precious materials were brought to the state of Israel. There are several traditions who do mention the Queen of Sheba. Today, the scholars are arguing, where was this kingdom? And they are saying, some of them Ethiopia, some of them Yemen, some of them southern Saudi Arabia. Nowadays, 2020, most scholars believe that she was located actually in southern Saudi Arabia, in a huge oasis. Before, two leading ideas were either Yemen or Ethiopia. But interesting thing is that the most detailed account of visits of Queen Sheba to Jerusalem was really here, from the Ethiopian soul. Now, Queen Sheba, according to Ethiopian tradition, was not called Sheba or Saba, but Makeda. And she indeed went to Jerusalem with the huge caravans. And of course, in Ethiopian tradition, she did not have hairy legs. She came to Solomon with all these riches. But in return, she had some tricky questions for him. And King Solomon, as a very wise man, was able to answer all those questions to her satisfaction. She remained in his palace for several months. On her way back home to Ethiopia, she delivered a baby, a son, which was fruit of love between Queen Sheba and King Solomon. And that young boy is known in history as Menelik the First. When he was 22 years old, he went back to Jerusalem to see his father. His father liked him very much. He stayed there, according to some accounts, for 2 years, and then he came back to Aksum. It is said that Queen Makeda was actually born here. He came back with the Ark of Covenant. It seems that he stole it. And when Solomon tried to catch him, he sent his army unsuccessfully. And according to the legends, the Ark of Covenant's been here in Aksum on the holy Ethiopian soil ever since. Is it possible? Where does the reality stop and myths begin? According to the archaeological research, this area indeed has been inhabited for almost 3,000 years. However, Queen Makeda ruled her kingdom 1,370 years BC, or about 3,400 years ago. That was 400 years before King Solomon. Now, are the King David and King Solomon real? Did they really build the first temple? Hard to say. Evidence is still needed to confirm those stories. Now, go back to those megaliths. As I said, all the official references, official sources, and when I say official, then I mention Encyclopedia Britannica, that's been around for 250 years. And almost any other scientific source in any country of the world is using Encyclopedia Britannica, well, they are saying this was built 1700 years back. Have people of Aksum Kingdom had tools to shape this material, to transport it, and to erect it? Now, many people, because of the look, call this material granite. It does look like a gray granite, pink, gray, white. However, this material is missing one important element, and that is quartz. No quartz. You don't see the beautiful shining lights coming from the quartz. Now, according to geologists, this material is called nepheline syenite. Looks like a granite. It's hard like a granite, specific weight like a granite. But instead of quartz, what we do have here is the aluminum. So it is really metallic. When you hit it, it does have different sound than other stones. Now, this type of material can be met all around the planet, but in very small quantities. And the biggest quantities are actually here in northern and eastern Ethiopia. I'm still in the Stella Park here in Aksum. This is one of the very beautiful standing obelisks, megaliths. And I've done some measurement here. First of all, when we see it, we can see that four sides have been dressed. All four sides. It is rectangular in base. Now the measurements. It is about 12 meters high, 111 centimeters long, and 65 centimeters thick. And using the specific weight for granite, I'm getting the mass of 23 tons. Huge, 23 tons. And this is what we can see above the ground. Probably when we add what is below the ground, we should get the mass of about 30 tons. Now, I've done the energy measurements first at the control site outside the park, And this is what I got. Date is January 6th, 2020. Beautiful sunny weather here in Ethiopia. 28 degrees. Excellent visibility. Now, the negative ion concentration, it varies from 100 to 1000 negative ions per cubic centimeter. Now, these are, I would say, regular and expected concentrations, considering the fact that we are above 2000 meters above the sea level and a lot of trees surround us. Positive ions 1000 to 5000, which is much more, which we can explain by the traffic and our technology. Electromagnetic radiation, EM smog, it's about 100, which is below the minimum quantities. Life energy, using experimental life energy meter, well, it is a scale from 0 to 100. At my home, which is of course full of the electronics and computers and TVs and so on, it is about 10%, and here at the control site it was about 24%. Magnetic field 32 to 38 microtesla, ultrasound 19 to 21, infrasound 23 to 27 hertz. So these are just the regular expected values. But when it comes to the megalith right here, negative ions are from 100 to 3000. Now 3000 are very good quantities when it comes to the healing aspect, because negative ions do clean our body from the viruses and bacteria, and they clear the atmosphere from dust, pollen, and so on. Positive 200 to 5000. Life energy here is at 30%, more than at the control point in the town. 30%, it's a very good level, meaning that these stones do have certain good energy level. Magnetic field 32 to 40 microtesla, a little bit more than at the control place. Now ultrasound has shown me the most interesting stuff. I could see some regular spikes at about 38 kilohertz. Infrasound 20 to 29 hertz. Orientation, I was expecting good regular orientation to the cardinal points. It did not happen. The orientation is about 5 degrees off, north, south, east and west. So, what to say about this? It does affect surrounding areas to some level, but not to healing level like on some other places, Bosnian pyramids, or in Sardinia, Nuragi, and some other phenomena. But still then intriguing. 3 tons have been erected here. Where those stones have been shaped, right here. Now we can see that they were shaped by other materials, probably stone tools. We don't have perfectly flat surfaces. So most probably they have moved big pieces of stones, very long, and then they were shaping them, they were dressing them right here before they were going to be erected. Three huge megalithic blocks, grand stela laying broken on the ground. Behind me, obelisk of Aksum, and the public heard about it a lot in the last couple of decades. And the big one, but the third as far as the mass, comparing to other two, King Azema's obelisk. Obelisk of Aksum was rediscovered in the late 1935, December, when the Italian soldiers came here to occupy Ethiopia. And 2 years later, based on order coming directly from Benito Mussolini, the fascist prime minister of Italy, the stela was brought from here to Napoli and from there to Rome. It was erected back, standing in the front of Ministry for Italian Africa. 1947, United Nations ruled that the stela was supposed to be brought back to Ethiopia. However, for decades, the promise was not fulfilled. In 1961, the Ethiopian Tsar, Haile Selassie, during his visit in Italy, repeatedly asked that stela be brought back. But then Italian architects explained him how difficult that task was and how expensive. He basically gave up, stating, okay, he's going to keep this stela in the hands of Italian as the example of the friendship between two countries. When Haile Selassie was removed from the power in 1974, by the generals, they said they do not respect what he said, they wanted the stela back. So finally in the year 2005, it was packed in 3 pieces, brought back, and in the year 2008, it was erected here as a matter of the national pride for the Ethiopians. It cost about 6 million euros at that time to move it back, and a lot of construction efforts with all the modern technology, cranes and the others. So how to explain that somebody does bring this piece? It can be 150, 350 or 520 tons from the quarry, which is 7 kilometers to the west from here, in one piece. That would be actually unbelievable and impossible task for the king Ezena's time. The idea is that hundreds of elephants and hundreds of thousands of slaves had this task accomplished is not really believable. You can bring 1,000 or 5,000 elephants, but this piece of stone can only fit just several elephants, and they cannot carry 600 tons undressed stone. The same thing goes for the slaves. One man can lift 50 kilos. Around one, you can put 100 people, 5 tons. You cannot put thousands of people because you need to lift it. And for the lifting, you have to have technology, which was not existent in the 4th century AD. Why do archaeologists assign such a construction feat to the 4th century? Well, because the King Ezena was the one who accepted Christianity, so he was the last pagan king. But then the huge state was established, and they're saying, well, because it was a rather powerful country, they did have resources. But of course, when the Christianity came here in the 4th century, around 330 AD, they did not respect pagan, as they were saying, customs, placing those big obelisks as tombstones, as they are saying. And indeed, below us in the ground, there are several tombs. 30 of them were discovered. But when we see how they were built using the small broken stones, broken plates, it has nothing to do with the superiority of this stela. These are two different time periods. So my conclusion is, those stelas were installed thousands of years before the known time. When we see one of the most superior underground chambers, for me they are resonance chambers, not tombs, because the precision, how those polygonal blocks were fitting each other without the binding material, it belongs at least to the last megalithic period on the planet, which was between 5,000 and 8,000 years back, if not the previous one. We can see there that some of the blocks were violently destroyed. We can see here that some of the blocks or stelas were also violently destroyed, and probably that is the case with the great stela as well. The idea is that the great stela that some of the archaeologists are trying to impose, because of its height and not enough place under the ground, that it collapsed by itself, for me is not acceptable. We are facing superior builders. Their technology, construction, transportation, erection, they would not make such cardinal mistake and not leave enough space to go under the ground. My experience with some of the menhirs, like with the biggest one in southern France, which was 175 tons in mass. Today, 4 broken pieces on the ground, but originally 7 meters below the ground. Here we can see 5 meters or so below the ground. But they also had those support plates in front of the stelas to keep the balance. So for sure, they had a way to keep it erected. Now, if this is the time frame, 5,000 to 8,000 years back, then what was the purpose? I wanted to see if they have certain energy properties. So I've done measurement of this obelisk of Aksum. So the negative ion on the obelisk of Aksum is from 1,000 to 18,000. Now 18,000. This is a healing level. Positive 8,000 to 15,000. Rather high, but we can see that there are more negative ions than positive, which means there is some extra negative electrical charge in the air, which is very beneficial for humans. EM smog, very low level, 0.0034. Life energy level, 28%, not very high, higher than regular atmosphere. Magnetic field, 34 to 44 microtesla. Ultrasound, 19 to 21 kilohertz. Infrasound, 23 to 29 hertz, just the regular values, nothing specially. Even the orientation is not regular. We don't have east, west, north, south. So when we are looking just those numbers, I would say that today this stella, these obelisks are energetically almost dead. But having in mind that below us is underground lake with potential underground water flows, tells us that there is a possibility that what we call today Stella Park, which is a nice hilly area, was at one point energetically related. The second thing, placing such a huge obelisks on the surface of the planet are excellent topographic or geodesical markers. The same thing goes for the obelisks in Karnak. So did they use them because those places were very significant for our planet? It's very possible. 7 largest obelisks stelas, 7 of them remind us on star system of Pleiades, 7 sisters of Pleiades. However, I was checking the other places with the broken stelas, at least 21 of them, and then more than 100 in the wider area. Was the size of the stela showing the biggest, the most shiny star? Was the distance between them, was relative distance between those stars looking from our planet? Was more than 100 stelas matching more than 100 stars in constellation Pleiades? Maybe. As we know, the ancient builders were using their monuments, megalithic sites and pyramid sites, for different purposes. So it could be the case here. And let me finish with the great kingdom of Aksumite from the 4th century. Even at that time, the travelers were writing about mighty kingdom, which was one of the 4 biggest powers on this planet. Rome, ancient Rome being the one, Persia being the second one, China, the third one, 3 kingdom of China, and the 4th one, the mighty kingdom of Aksum. At that time, it had a surface of the whole Ethiopia, like today, plus Djibouti, plus Eritrea, plus all of the Sudan, because 1700 years back, the kings were defeating the kingdom of Kush, or Mero kingdom, in northern Sudan, parts of Egypt, whole of the Yemen, and parts of Saudi Arabia. So the complete trade through the Red Sea belonged to this kingdom. They were very powerful, trading as far as Alexandria, Istanbul, Sri Lanka, India, and Saudi Peninsula. But eventually, the Rome, and then later on with Islam, the Red Sea went to another hands. And 1100 years back, the last king of Aksum had the same power. And then eventually, they were losing more and more, and the capital went from Aksum to the south. 3 names: Aksum, Abyssinia, Ethiopia. And today, Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. The last Tsar, King of Kings, Tsar of Tsars, Haile Selassie, who ruled the country from 1930 to 1974. He was actually the remnant of a very powerful kingdom of Aksum. And then from then, we could see this country going to communist and to capitalist hands. This is a special country, not to be missed. Dr. Sam Osmanagic from Aksum. much smarter. They knew that by giving this breathing space, in a case of the earthquake, the blocks would lock themselves. So really, these are earthquake-proven structures. Now, this is the land of wonder. Once we come to those huge obelisks of Aksum, we're going to see some of the carvings. And archaeologists are, like almost always, wrong. They assign them to the 4th century AD rulers. This one to the 6th century AD rulers. They had nothing to do with them, except for the fact they lived around. Sometimes they would leave some of their carvings, inscriptions, and sometimes they would even be buried underneath those structures. But they had nothing to do with the process of the construction, because they belong to the era with more advanced civilizations. And when archaeologists see the false door, they said, well, this was, to trap or to fool the looters. Another nonsense by official archaeologists. And then when they see some carvings, windows-like, they said, oh, the number of windows equals the number of tombs underneath. I wonder what people 50 years from now will think about us. But I know for one thing for sure, they will be laughing at us.
Wow, that was already 50 minutes. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Ethiopia, home to more than 100 million people, the original home of the coffee bean, seat of the African Union, and a nation whose roots stretch back into ancient times. Ethiopia.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. The city of Ur was one of the most important Sumerian city-states in ancient Mesopotamia during the 3rd millennium BC, and one of the best preserved and most spectacular remains of this ancient city is the Great Ziggurat of Ur. The Great Ziggurat, which is today located in the Dekar province in southern Iraq, is a massive step pyramid construction measuring 64 metres in length, 46 metres in width, and 30 metres in height. The height, however, is just speculation, as only the bottom of the structure survives today, and even this has been heavily renovated. The most significant excavations of the Great Ziggurat were conducted over a 12-year period beginning in 1922 by archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley. The ziggurat first revealed by these excavations was not the same structure we see today, as much of the monument now has elements of modern reconstruction based on how scholars believe it once looked. It consists of successively smaller platforms that had a core of mud brick, which was covered in burnt brick and was designed in such a way to protect the core from the elements. The The square-shaped holes that we see on the sides are not windows as some might think, but a way for excess moisture to escape the structure. The construction of the ziggurat began under King Ur-Nammu of the 3rd dynasty of Ur around the 21st century BC and was completed by his son King Shulgi. The structure was located in the temple complex of the city-state, which was the administrative heart of ancient Ur. Professor Brian Penpraise describes some of the important geometrical properties and solar alignments that were incorporated into the ziggurat's design. He said, "The different levels have dimensions that follow numerical ratios important to the Sumerians. The proportion of the width and length for the ground level are very close to the exact ratio of 3:2, whilst the second level maintains a dimension of 4:3. Access to the upper levels was from a celestially aligned northeastern face, oriented towards the summer solstice sunrise, with a grand staircase facing the first rays of the summer sun." The great ziggurat was dedicated to the moon god Nana, who was the patron deity of the city. As the Sumerian gods were commonly linked to the eastern mountains, ziggurats may have functioned as representations of their homes, although this is debatable. Archaeoastronomer James Q. Jacobs notes some precise relationships between the latitude of the moon-dedicated ziggurat of Ur and the moon god Sin's temple in Haran. Google Earth revealed that the latitude at Haran equals 3/4 Atan, or arctangent, and the ziggurat of Ur 3/5 Atan, and that the latitude number of the Ur ziggurat is an accurate value for pi. Both pi and Atan are significant in higher mathematics, and both are seen in the Sumerian civilization from around 4,000 years ago. It is interesting because both of these temples of Ur and Haran are dedicated to the moon. They both show evidence of astronomical knowledge as well as geodesy, which are what we call exact sciences. There isn't any evidence to say that the ancient Sumerians understood the heliocentric model of the solar system, but to them the stars and planets were important. They made many detailed recordings and calculations of what they saw in the night sky, recording star patterns, detailed movements, and so on. Choosing the moon god to worship wasn't about just randomly choosing a god to be their number one, but all indications point to the development of astronomy being of paramount importance. The moon was the largest object in the night sky, and it is thought that the ancient Sumerians believed the movement of celestial objects was the result of the actions of the gods. Unfortunately, there is no known text that explains precisely what ziggurats were intended to symbolise, but based on references to the structures in Sumerian and Akkadian language texts, modern scholars have determined that the ancient Mesopotamians believed they were the earthly homes of their many deities, although this is open to debate. But with this in mind, we are told that the people of Ur believed that their ziggurat was the place on earth where the moon god Nana chose to dwell, and a single small shrine was placed on the summit. Apparently the people of ancient Mesopotamia believed that their gods had needs like humans, and a bedchamber was provided for Nana in the shrine. It was apparently occupied by a maiden who was chosen to be the god's companion. Personally, I'm not 100% sure about this whole idea. I don't think the ancient Mesopotamians literally believed that the ziggurats were the earthly homes of the gods. That doesn't make any sense to me. But maybe each structure was dedicated to a god that was associated with a celestial object, which in the case of the Great Ziggurat was Nana, aka the moon. I think it makes more sense that a Sumerian high priest and his maiden would have occupied the shrine at the top, as opposed to it being a physical abode for the mythical moon god. In those days, the high priest would no doubt have also been an astrologer and astronomer, as well as a mystic, a man of wisdom for the city-state. The ziggurat, in my opinion, was an observatory or celestial watchtower under the control of the high priest. It wasn't the mortal home of a moon god, but the home of moon worship and observation. On the side stairway of the ziggurat's northwestern part was a kitchen, which again we are told was likely used to prepare food for the god, but I would say for the high priest. The god's mortal servants were provided for as well, and the outer enclosure of the ziggurat contained a temple storehouse, the houses of the priests, and a royal ceremonial palace. Ziggurats were not just a religious building dedicated to a god, they were central, important locations in each Sumerian city, and were the centres of innovation. They were part of larger temple complexes where young men would study in scribal schools, and these complexes were probably more akin to primitive universities than religious temples. It is under the shade of the towering ziggurats that Mesopotamian scholars developed advanced mathematics, even formulating the concept of fractions, although all of their mathematics and science was practical and not theoretical as it is today. During the 48 years of the reign of King Shulgi, the city-state of Ur flourished like never before. It became the capital of an empire that controlled a large part of Mesopotamia.
Thank you for being here, appreciate it.
To unify the masses, he
Appreciate it very
introduced
much,
a new
thank you.
god that everybody could worship, himself. And he also made himself the patron of arts. Poets and scribes were commissioned to write about the king's prowess in various aspects, such as hunting, warfare, and music,
Okay,
elevating
catch you
his
later. See ya.
self-importance as he grew the cult of King Shulgi. After his death, however, the city began to decline. His sons were unable to hold the empire together, and the city of Ur fell apart, and was then sacked by the Elamites. After this, a succession of foreign kings ruled the city. In the 4th century BC, the great Euphrates River changed its course, and the city of Ur was abandoned as it lacked irrigation. Over time, the great city disappeared from human memory and would be forgotten until the
See you later,
19th
thank you for being
century
here.
AD.
Yeah, that's your role, thank you.
This is when European exploration in the Mesopotamian region rediscovered it. Excavations were carried out, and the remains of the Great Ziggurat were rediscovered. Sir Leonard Woolley was the archaeologist who excavated the site in the 1920s. He dug deep underneath the structure and found that what was built by King Ur-Nammu